Kids in the 70s had daily habits that shaped an entire generation. These weren't toys or games. They were ordinary activities that every child did without thinking twice. Today, these same activities have completely vanished from childhood. Yet the kids who grew up with them became the most resourceful generation in history. What were these everyday things? Well, let's start with something that was in every single backyard across America. Back in the 70s, kids had a drinking fountain that never ran dry. It was green, coiled up like a snake, and tasted like rubber mixed with adventure. The garden hose became the unofficial beverage dispenser for an entire generation. Every backyard had one. You'd run outside, sweaty from hours of play, and there it was, your salvation hanging on a hook. Turn the spigot, wait for the hot water to clear out, then gulp down whatever came next. The garden hose was basically the drive-thru of the 70s, except you couldn't complain about slow service. What makes this wild is those hoses were made from rubber and vinyl that contained lead and other chemicals we now know are dangerous. Nobody filtered the water. Nobody worried about what had been growing inside that hose all winter. The water sat in the sun all day, getting warm enough to brew tea. It's like the whole generation collectively agreed that convenience trumped flavor, which explains why gas station hot dogs became a thing. The ritual had its own etiquette. You learned to let the hot water run out first. You discovered which angle gave the best pressure. You mastered the art of drinking without getting soaked. Most kids could operate a garden hose better than most adults could operate their VCRs. Health experts today would lose their minds watching 70s kids line up at the garden hose like it was a water fountain at school. Yet back then, it represented something bigger than just quenching thirst. It symbolized a childhood where kids solved their own problems without adult intervention. Garden hose water had more character than most restaurant beverages today. It just happened to taste like a tire factory explosion. But that independence extended far beyond just getting drinks. The streetlights were the original parental GPS system. When those lights flickered on, it was time to head home. No negotiation, no extensions, no excuses. This simple rule governed the outdoor lives of an entire generation. Morning came and kids scattered like dandelion seeds in the wind. No detailed itineraries, no check-ins every hour. The neighborhood became their kingdom, and they ruled it until those streetlights announced the end of their reign. Some kids tested the boundaries, but most respected the universal curfew. Parents basically operated on the honor system, which worked about as well as you'd expect when dealing with kids who thought climbing trees was a competitive sport. The freedom was intoxicating. Kids rode bikes to places their parents had never seen. They explored construction sites, vacant lots, and wooded areas that would make modern parents hyperventilate. They knocked on doors to see if friends could play, often meeting kids whose names they never learned, but whose backyards they knew by heart. The neighborhood became one giant cafeteria where every mom was potentially your lunch lady. Adventure found kids instead of the other way around. They'd discover creeks, abandoned buildings, or fascinating junk piles. They'd organize elaborate games of tag that spanned multiple yards. Every empty lot became a potential playground, every tree a climbing challenge worth attempting. It was like having a giant timer in the sky, except this timer also helped you not get hit by cars. The streetlight system only worked because the whole community participated. Neighbors knew which kids belong where. Adults felt responsible for all the children, not just their own. This freedom to roam required entertainment that didn't depend on staying in one place. Before the internet gave kids unlimited entertainment, they had to get creative with the phone. 1-800 numbers became the YouTube of the 70s. Free, accessible, and surprisingly addictive for bored children with nothing better to do. The discovery usually happened by accident. Maybe you'd see a commercial with a catchy jingle and a toll-free number. Maybe you'd find a business card with mysterious digits. Some kids kept lists of interesting numbers like other kids collected baseball cards or comic books. Kids basically turned telemarketing into entertainment, which is probably the only time in history anyone has been grateful for automated phone systems. Weather services became surprisingly popular, not because kids cared about barometric pressure, but because hearing an official-sounding voice announce the temperature felt important. Time services offered precise atomic clock readings that made kids feel connected to something bigger than their living rooms. Calling the time service was like having Siri, except Siri only knew one thing and had the personality of a refrigerator manual. Meanwhile, some companies figured out this accidental audience and started offering content specifically for children. Pre-recorded stories, songs, or promotional jingles designed to keep young callers on the line. These discoveries spread through neighborhoods faster than gossip. The ritual had its own protocol. Wait until parents weren't listening. Dial carefully to avoid long-distance charges. Hold the phone so siblings could hear too. It's like podcasts, except you couldn't pause, rewind, or skip the boring parts, so basically torture disguised as entertainment. What made this appealing wasn't just the content, it was the act of accessing adult information independently. These calls made kids feel sophisticated, like they were tapping into secret knowledge usually reserved for grown-ups. But phones weren't the only source of unexpected entertainment. The bathroom became an accidental library thanks to whatever reading material happened to be within arm's reach. Shampoo bottles, toothpaste tubes, and soap dispensers transformed into literature when you were trapped with nothing else to do. Kids memorized ingredient lists like poetry. Sodium lauryl sulfate became as familiar as favorite song lyrics. The warning labels on cleaning products provided dramatic tension. Some kids could recite entire ingredient lists from memory, impressing friends with their chemical knowledge. Reading shampoo bottles was basically the original social media, lots of meaningless information that somehow kept you entertained for way longer than it should have. Then there were cereal boxes, which elevated this practice to an art form. Every breakfast became a reading session. The nutritional information told stories about vitamins and minerals you'd never heard of. Kids learned about riboflavin and thiamine before they learned about algebra. But the cereal box experience extended beyond just reading. Mail-in offers promised decoder rings, stickers, or small toys in exchange for box tops and small handling fees. Kids would carefully cut out UPC codes like they were harvesting currency. Cereal boxes had more educational content than most textbooks. Plus, they came with free prizes, which makes you wonder what schools were doing wrong. Companies understood this captive audience and designed packaging accordingly. Bright colors, interesting fonts, and engaging graphics turned mundane products into mini magazines. Even household cleaners featured detailed instructions that read like science experiments. The back of a cereal box provided more entertainment per square inch than most modern streaming services, mainly because you actually had to use your imagination to fill in the gaps. This reading happened everywhere. Waiting rooms, car trips, kitchen tables, anywhere products with text intersected with bored children. But this accidental education paled in comparison to the structured entertainment that awaited them every Saturday morning. Saturday morning was sacred time. From 6 in the morning until noon, television belongs entirely to children. This wasn't just programming, it was a weekly cultural event that united kids across the entire country in front of their television sets. The ritual began early. Wake up before parents, tiptoe to the living room, turn on the TV with the volume low, pour a bowl of cereal, grab a spot on the floor, and prepare for 6 hours of uninterrupted cartoon bliss. The early bird got the best spot on the carpet. It was like Christmas morning every single week, except instead of presents under a tree, you got talking dogs solving mysteries and educational songs about grammar. The lineup was legendary. Scooby-Doo taught kids that most supernatural mysteries had logical explanations and that snacks could solve almost any problem. The Bugs Bunny Show provided slapstick comedy and classical music appreciation disguised as entertainment. Kids learned to appreciate symphonies through cartoon chaos, yet Schoolhouse Rock changed everything. These 3-minute animated segments disguised education as entertainment so effectively that kids learned multiplication tables, grammar rules, and American history without realizing they were being taught. Saturday morning cartoons basically did what schools tried to do all week, except with better graphics and singing vegetables. The programming block created appointment television before anyone knew that term existed. Kids planned their weekends around these shows. They'd arrange sleepovers specifically to watch cartoons together. Missing your favorite show meant waiting a whole week for another chance. Parents got 6 hours of peace while kids got 6 hours of paradise, which made Saturday morning cartoons the greatest diplomatic achievement in human history. Even commercial breaks became part of the entertainment. Toy advertisements felt like extended previews of coming attractions. Cereal commercials featured elaborate storylines and memorable characters. But enjoying these cartoons required mastering the basic technology of television itself. Television was a participatory experience in the 70s. No remote control meant someone had to physically walk to the TV set, turn a dial, and manually hunt for decent programming. This simple act shaped how families interacted with entertainment. The channel selector was a chunky dial that required actual force to turn. Click, click, click. Each position represented a different channel, though many positions led to static or completely empty airwaves. The satisfying click of each channel change became part of the viewing experience. Kids became the original remote control, which explains why so many of them developed strong leg muscles from constantly walking back and forth to change channels for their parents. Reception was an art form. Moving the antenna could dramatically improve picture quality or completely destroy it. Some families developed elaborate antenna adjustment rituals involving aluminum foil, coat hangers, and strategic positioning of family members around the room. The person with the magic touch became the family's unofficial broadcast engineer. Watching TV was basically a full-contact sport where the person with the strongest will and the fastest legs controlled the entertainment for the entire family. Channel changing became a negotiation. Families had to agree on programming because switching required effort and disrupted everyone's viewing experience. This led to compromise, patience, and sometimes heated debates. Democracy lived and died by the channel dial. The mechanical nature of television made it feel substantial. These weren't flat screens mounted on walls. They were heavy wooden cabinets that dominated living rooms. The tubes warmed up slowly, sometimes taking minutes to display a clear picture. Getting good reception required more engineering skills than launching a satellite, and somehow involved the entire family standing in weird positions around the living room. Static between channels created its own entertainment. Kids would stare at the dancing snow, looking for patterns or faces in the chaos. But limited television options meant kids had to create their own entertainment. The toy store lived in your garage, basement, and kitchen junk drawer. Kids became engineers, architects, and inventors using nothing but discarded materials and unlimited imagination. Cardboard boxes transformed into spaceships. Empty cans became walkie-talkies. Building toys required actual skills. You had to measure, cut, nail, and glue things together. Mistakes meant starting over or finding creative solutions. Success felt earned because you'd invested time, effort, and problem-solving into creating something unique. Every finished project was a personal triumph. It was like having a three-dimensional printer, except the printer was your brain, and the materials were whatever your dad was about to throw away. Cardboard boxes provided endless possibilities. Refrigerator boxes became houses, spaceships, or secret hideouts. Smaller boxes turned into cars, boats, or treasure chests. The bigger the appliance purchase, the better the building materials became for enterprising kids. Meanwhile, wood scraps from construction projects became building blocks for more permanent creations. Kids learned to use hammers, nails, and basic tools through trial and error. Safety was optional, and supervision was minimal. Creating dangerous toys from household junk was basically the original STEM education, except with a lot more potential for injury and a lot less adult supervision. Slingshots represented the pinnacle of homemade weaponry. Finding the perfect Y-shaped branch required scouting expeditions through neighborhoods and parks. Attaching rubber strips demanded engineering skills. Testing became a neighborhood event with makeshift target ranges. Kids basically became junk scientists, turning trash into treasure with the kind of creativity that would make modern engineers jealous. The process taught resourcefulness. When you needed something specific but couldn't buy it, you figured out how to make it or find a substitute. This mindset extended beyond toy making into general problem solving. But all this creativity and independence was happening against the backdrop of a school system that operated very differently. School in the 70s felt like a completely different institution designed for a completely different world. Walking through those hallways meant entering an environment where adult authority was absolute, technology was minimal, and educational methods hadn't changed much since the 1950s. Corporal punishment was legal, common, and socially accepted. Principals kept wooden paddles in their offices like tools of the trade. Teachers could send disruptive students to the office for physical discipline without parental consent or legal consequences. The paddle hanging on the wall served as both deterrent and promise. Schools basically operated like friendly dictatorships where the adults made all the rules and the kids followed them or got whacked with a piece of wood, which somehow passed for character building. Teaching technology was beautifully primitive. Chalkboards dominated every classroom, creating clouds of dust with every erased equation. Film strips required darkened rooms and the distinctive clicking sound of advancing frames. The smell of mimeograph machines filled hallways with that distinctive purple ink aroma. Safety drills prepared kids for every possible disaster except the ones that actually happened. Fire drills taught orderly evacuation procedures. Tornado drills meant crouching in hallways with your head between your knees. Nuclear attack drills trained children to hide under desks as if wooden furniture could protect against atomic weapons. Duck and cover drills basically taught kids that the best defense against nuclear war was good posture and a sturdy desk, which explains a lot about 70s logic. Then there was lunch, which came with its own challenges. Milk arrived in small wax cartons that required a special folding technique to create a proper spout. Getting it wrong meant milk everywhere and embarrassment in front of classmates. Lunch ladies ruled their kingdoms with iron ladles and stern expressions. Calculators were forbidden, which meant math required actually understanding numbers and processes. Long division demanded pencil, paper, and patience. School lunch was basically survival training disguised as nutrition, where opening a milk carton correctly was considered a life skill on par with reading. Teachers maintained order through a combination of respect, fear, and institutional authority. They commanded attention simply by entering the room. Students stood when adults entered. These rigid school environments were just one part of a childhood experience that differed dramatically from life today. The 70s created a generation that knew how to entertain themselves, solve problems creatively, and navigate independence without constant supervision. Those experiences shaped an entire way of thinking about childhood, responsibility, and growing up.